Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, "Next week, I'm going to fire you." Worked for a shitty airline company. Let's just make up a name. United Blairlines. At this company, they started a smaller company that could hire and train people to run the planes, but pay them way less at certain airports. Where my colleagues at other airports were making over $20 per hour, I was getting paid $10.25 for the same and sometimes more work. It honestly would scare you to know how little the people who are the ones that make sure your plane takes off safely are paid. All of us had 2 to 3 jobs to be able to pay rent, and we were all in the job for the benefits, free flights to anywhere in the country, on standby. Anyway, I had a boss, we'll call him Jim. I could tell many stories on how terrible of a boss he was, but this one has actual malicious compliance. I had to go to the hospital from the airport because of intense pain in my stomach. It turns out that because of stress caused by that job, my intestines decided to stop functioning. Anyway, I spent the day in the hospital and then they gave me a note saying that I didn't have to work the next 2 days. I told Jim's boss that, since I hated talking to Jim. When I went back into work 3 days later, we had 5 people total to load all luggage, load the water, and push out 5 planes in a little over an hour. Already an incredible amount of work for so few people. We had our morning work meeting to discuss how ducked we were, then Jim asked me into his office. "Your attendance is unacceptable," he said. Dumbfounded, I asked what he meant. "You've been late a couple of times and now missing the past 3 days." I said, "Jim, I have the note from the hospital. According to work policy, that shouldn't affect my attendance. I don't care what work policy says. I'm going to fire you." Again, I cited work policy since we were protected by a union. I said, "Jim, you have to give me an attendance warning before you're allowed to fire me for attendance. This is the first time I'm hearing about attendance, so you can't fire me right now." Jim said, "It doesn't matter, I'm going to give you a warning right now, and when I get back from vacation next week, you're going to be fired. Now go back to work, my decision is final." So, I told my co-workers what happened. Then I decided, alright, well, if next week he's firing me, I'll just leave now. Even though their day was about to be ducked since now 4 people were working 5 planes, they all said, "Duck this place, get out of here." So I left and went to get breakfast. This all happened at 4 a.m. As I'm enjoying my meal, Jim calls me. I happily ignore. He calls 3 more times and then texts me, asking where I was at. I told him, "You fired me, why would I keep working for you?" No response. I try to soak in the sight of Jim running between planes like a chicken with his head cut off. I don't imagine any plane took off on time that morning. I get a call from HR, and the union rep, and the general manager, who is Jim's boss. They all said Jim was wrong and asked me if I could come back to work it out. But quitting felt so good and I felt such weight lifted off my shoulders thinking about not working there anymore, so I never went back. Some more info. Although this isn't so satisfying, it's more a testament of United Blairlines' complete lack of ethics. Jim got in really big trouble when he had a guy who had a shoulder injury and had a note and told Jim several times he couldn't do super heavy labor. Jim sent him to the bag room by himself anyway. Imagine having to lift 300 to 750 to 70-pound bags over your head per hour, all while running between bag carts and the belt. Needless to say, the guy tore his shoulder and had to get surgery on it. They still didn't fire Jim. Instead, they promoted him to manage the workers who did ticketing and no manual labor. As far as I know, Jim still works for United. My coworker still cannot move the way he used to 2 years later. The next one is titled, "Don't Want 60 Seconds of Adjustment?" Okay, enjoy waiting 6 weeks. So I'm a dental assistant for a private practice. Let me just preface this by saying, most of our patients are wonderful people. Friendly. Happy to see us. Respect our professional opinions and recommendations, etc. But literally just like 3 hours ago, I had the biggest Karen in for what should have been a simple appointment. So when we do crowns, or caps as some people know them as, we prep the tooth beforehand, and take an impression. Then that impression goes to a lab, and the techs there make the crown. It takes 2 to 3 weeks for them to send the crown back. When we deliver the crown to the patient, the doctor and I try the crown in first to see how it fits. It is very rare that it fits perfectly. We almost always have to make some adjustments. Shaving down the crown here and there, checking the space in between the teeth, checking the bite, etc. All of this is standard. The main thing we use is called articulating paper. When the patient bites down on it, we can see heavy blue markings where the bite needs adjusting. The more we adjust, the lighter those marks get, and even stop marking altogether sometimes. Most exchanges with the patient are like this: "How's it feel? It's a little high. Okay, we'll adjust that." We use the articulating paper. Then grind the crown down a little. "How does it feel now?" "Oh, feels much better." "Okay, cool, let's cement it in." This takes maybe 5 minutes at most. This lady we had tonight was having none of it. Us: "How's it feel?" Karen: "Ugh, it's way off." Us: "Okay, we'll adjust it." "How does it feel now?" Karen: "The same." Us: Really? No change?" Karen: "The same." Us: "Okay, no biggie, let's adjust more." We did this maybe for 5 minutes, over and over, and she kept insisting that it was exactly the same. No change. Even though the marks were gone at this point, meaning that her teeth were no longer even touching the crown. At this point we had a couple options which the doctor presented to her. "Doc, okay, well, I can keep adjusting the crown. The only issue is that if I keep reducing the porcelain on top, the metal underneath might end up showing. Are you okay with that?" Karen: "No." Doc: "Okay, well then I need to make a small adjustment to the tooth above this one, so that they don't touch. It's very superficial." Karen: "No. Don't touch my other teeth." Doc: "We do this the entire time, ma'am. It doesn't harm the teeth. We're basically just polishing it." Karen: "No. That's a lie. If you guys did it correctly the first time, you wouldn't have to adjust it at all." Me: "Ma'am, we do this for everyone. The lab almost never makes them perfect. We either have to adjust the crown itself or the opposing teeth." Karen: "No, you screwed up." Me: "Well, we have to adjust one or the other, so which would you prefer? Do you want metal showing?" Karen: "No." Me: "So we can polish the opposing tooth?" Karen: "No." Me: "It'll literally take a few seconds." Karen: "No, you're lying. It's gonna harm my teeth." At this point the doctor suggested getting our office manager to talk to Karen. Our office manager is an awesome lady. She's old, doesn't give a duck, and is 2 years away from retirement. I told her the situation, and she laughed and said, "Okay, let's make her wait another month." I don't give a crap. So she marched right in there and said, "Okay, ma'am. Since you don't want this crown, we'll send it back to the lab and have them redo it." So instead of just waiting the 60 seconds for us to adjust, she now has to wait 3 weeks to come in again. And that's just to re-prep the tooth. Then she has to wait another 3 weeks for the crown to come back from the lab, again. Anyway, thanks for reading. I mostly just wanted to type this out to rant. I've been working as a dental assistant for almost a decade now, and I've never had an exchange like that. It was so bizarre. I straight up think she was either lying to our faces or just crazy. It made 0 sense. Edit: to the people saying she has every right to request the crown be redone. No duh. That's not my issue. My issue is that she accused us of lying. Screamed at us. Wouldn't tell us why it felt exactly the same and didn't want any solutions we offered. I've had many patients request crowns be redone. Not a problem. Sometimes the color is off. Sometimes the fit is really wrong. They just weren't total Karens about it. You can be polite and still get your way. The next one is titled, "Won't Help Me Get to Work." I'll find my own way. My friend is educated as a carpenter, and this is a story from the time he was an apprentice. As it is with apprenticeships, being the apprentice means a lot of hazing from the more senior members of a company. This also happened to my friend. He had a 35 to 40 kilometers drive from his home to his workplace, and as he wasn't 18 yet, he had to drive on a moped. Doing his apprenticeship, the company got an order for some work to do in a bigger city, a 2-hour drive away. He asked his boss whether he should show up at the company earlier, to catch a ride with the other carpenters. However, the boss, deciding to be a jerk and join in on the hazing, said no, he would have to travel there by himself. He would, however, be compensated for travel expenses, regardless of how he managed to get there. Okay then. So he devised a plan. For the entire week, he showed up at work on location at the bigger city, always well rested and suspiciously not seeming like he just had a 100 kilometers drive on a moped. The week after, when the job was done and everything returned back to normal in their home city, my friend came to his boss with the receipts and nearly gave the boss a heart attack. The boss figured traveling expenses meant paying for gasoline, which was his mistake. To the boss' surprise, my friend took a flight from his town with an airport to the small airport in the city they were working in. For the entire week, he had taken a flight to and from work, saving a lot of travel time using the most expensive travel option possible. How had he been able to afford this? My friend's father was upset about the hazing, and when they wouldn't give my friend a ride, his father had had enough. He would pay for the travel expenses for going by plane, teaching the boss a lesson. When everyone had figured what had happened, and in the following days picked up their jaws from the floor, everyday life resumed. Even the boss, bitter about the bill, could see the funny side of things, and my friend stayed with the company until he got his degree. The next one is titled, Division Manager Risks Safety to Save 20 Seconds, Sometimes Unions Do Right. I was a part-time supervisor for a package moving company that moves those brown packages. Prior to running an aircraft unload crew, I spent a couple years in the training department training new employees on ramp, tarmac operations, and was very familiar with the air operation manual that covers every aspect of the ramp, aircraft load-unload operations. In that manual, it explains the proper procedure and timing for approaching and putting up the aircraft stairs when an aircraft arrives. One section deals with aircraft that do not have auxiliary power units. Older aircraft that do not have these do not have the ability to open the cargo door without ground power attached. For that reason, when the aircraft comes to a stop, the pilot sets the parking brake, and the ground crew blocks the front tires only. At this point, the aircraft is supposed to shut down the engines on the side of the doors. The manual says the ground crew supervisor must visually confirm those engines are shut down prior to anyone or anything approaching the aircraft, or putting up crew stairs. One day I arrive for the supervisor pre-operations meeting, and I'm instructed that I must instruct my crew to put up the crew stairs as soon as the front tires are blocked. I tell my supervisor that this isn't the proper operation, and he informs me that this comes from the division manager. He tells me, well, that is what I was told to do, so that is what I'm telling you to do. I proceed to his boss, the manager, and show him the operations manual and explain that it isn't what it says, and that it is unsafe to approach any aircraft that has engines running. That manager tells me if you disagree to take it up with the division manager. So I march my butt down the division manager's office and show him the operations manual. And he tells me that because the aircraft is stopped and the front wheels blocked, that the engines on that side are being shut down, so the stairs could go immediately up and ignore the 20 seconds it takes to make sure the engine has spun down and is off. I'm told I will do it his way as he is the division manager, and that is it. Malicious compliance, go out to unload aircraft with my crew, and explain that I don't want you to be unsafe, but we are going to put the new rule to the test. I told them all to be ready and to move extra quickly to block the tires as soon as the plane stopped. And as soon as it was blocked, to put the stairs up as fast as possible and be mindful in case something went wrong. I flew up those stairs to greet the engineer that usually, without stairs there, cracks the door so he can peek out and open the cargo door. Needless to say, I scared the crap out of the engineer when he cracks the door and I pull it open and say hi. Slightly stunned, he says hello, and gives me the wait one moment. He opens the cargo door, and then waves me inside. He asks me, "Why are the stairs up and why are you there?" I explain what I wrote above to him, and he shakes his head and says, "Oh my gosh, no." He says, "Come with me and tell the pilot and co-pilot." I tell them the division's manager's reasoning, and the pilot says, "There are many reasons why we might leave those engines running, and that while normally they are shut down as soon as the brake is set, that it isn't always the case." I told him I agreed and I tried to do something about it. Pilot looks at me and says, "I got you, I'll walk upstairs right now," and threatened to grieve it through the pilots' union. I thank him, and the next day the division manager had changed his mind, and we went back to doing it properly. Division manager didn't know it was me who threw him under the bus for not listening to me. Manager instructs me to instruct employees to work unsafely. Pilots questions me about it. I explain. Pilot threatens to grieve and the manager then changes his mind. The next one is titled, "Don't Want to Join the Queue?" That's fine. Enjoy the wait. This happened a while back, but I only remembered it recently. I work security in a phone shop in a major city. Pretty much the flagship shops overflow shops, so we aren't busy unless the main shop is packed. That day both shops were insanely full. There was a large queue in the shop and it wasn't getting smaller. This man walks in and starts walking past the queue. It's not like the queue is hard to miss. So I approach him. Me, "Excuse me, sir, there's a queue there, you need to join." Him, "No, I'm fine." Me, "Sir, there's a queue, you have to join it if you want to talk to staff." He has now walked past the queue, which is about 10 people big, and is standing opposite the desk by the wall. Me, "Sir, if you want to talk to staff, you have to join the queue." Him, "I heard you the first time." Me, "Okay, but you will not be served before the people in the queue." Him, "Whatever, you go back to the door and leave me alone." I look at the manager and he gives me a nod to let me know he's got this. The man tried a couple of times to be served, but he was first told to join the queue by staff. Then he was just ignored as they served the people in the queue. The queue does not get smaller, in fact, it grows a couple of times. I watch him get annoyed, and start huffing and cursing under his breath. He has to wait for almost an hour and a half because he wouldn't join the queue. When the shop is finally empty, the staff takes their sweet time with the paperwork. The manager said they could and he would sort him out. The manager approaches him and he's not happy. He complains about the wait and the manager just looks at him with absolute incredulity. He says something racist to the manager and the manager kicks him out. The next one is titled, "Lightning Carry on Luggage." This story isn't mine but a family friend who told me at breakfast the other day. So a while ago he was traveling, remember traveling to other countries, from London back to Sydney. Now in his carry-on, he had 2 heavy winter jackets and a wool scarf. When he got to check-in he had to weigh his carry-on and it had to be 7 kg, and unfortunately, it was 7.3 kg. The clerk told him, you either had to find a way to lower the weight of his bag or pay the excess weight fee. He wasn't going to do that as his bag was pretty full already and he didn't want to open his main luggage in the middle of the airport. Cue malicious compliance. So in front of the clerk, he took his winter coats and scarf from in his bag, put them on himself, and then weighed his bag again. And what do you know, it was under the weight, it was about 6 kg. After he checked in, he pulled into the side bench, took the coats and scarves off, and put them back in his bag. Honestly, he still doesn't understand why she didn't stop him. I mean, I get having too much weight, but 0.3 kg isn't a lot at the end of the day. The next one is titled, You Want Thick Cheese? You got it, lady. I work in a grocery store deli. Normally it isn't busy and most of the customers are friendly, but there's always that one old lady who has a vendetta with anyone behind the counter. Unfortunately, I just so happen to be the only person behind the counter. Good evening, ma'am. Is there anything I can help you find today? Before I can even finish, the customer, cuts me off, a personal pet peeve and immediate red flag. Give me a ½ pound of yellow American cheese, she demanded. And cut it as thick as you can get it, give me, is red flag number 2. That's when the gears in my head start turning. As thick as I can? Okay. We have a dedicated cheese slicer and it can cut chunks up to 1.5 inches thick. So without even speaking I retrieve the cheese, turn the dial to as high as it'll go, and then back some cause the slicer turns itself off from the strain if you cut it too thick, and slice off that gold brick before placing it on the scale. By this point, the brick weighs about 4/5 of a pound and Kay is absolutely flabbergasted. With that all too familiar customer service smile, I print the label, place it in the bag and say, "Is there anything else I can get for you today?" She responds, "No," and takes the bag and leaves in a huff. About 10 minutes later, after I assumed she went to harass the meat department and whoever else before going to the customer service center, the store manager, head honcho and total bro, came back to the deli and asked what happened. Apparently she complained about me. He says, "Hey Jondafish, a woman just came up front and complained about some cheese you cut for her." To which I reply, "She said she wanted it cut as thick as I could get it." We shared a laugh for a few seconds and just told me not to do it again. The last one is titled, "Just Don't Talk to Her, okay?" So I work at a diner after getting laid off again this year. I've recently got a new full-time job that pays much better and my last week has been total hell. We've lost a lot of servers and can barely stay open, but they pulled out the last person who should be rehired. Let's call her SS is a heroin addict who can't stay sober to save her life. She is the worst worker, barely able to stay awake, slurring and horrible with customers. She is a troublemaker too, getting in arguments over nothing with other workers and storming off early every shift. The other night we were extremely busy and S was arguing with a customer insisting she did take their order wrong. They told her wrong and I called the manager. And she told me, "Just don't talk to her, ignore her and do your job." Well, I was about at my melting point. This junkie is a liability and I'm not a babysitter, so if my manager wants me to ignore her I will. So I do exactly what she says. I ignore S and not 10 minutes she was gone. It went exactly like you'd think. She calls me over to defend her and I simply act like I don't hear her. She asks again louder but I didn't acknowledge her and she gets belligerent. I'm talking a full rant to scream to tears in moments over nothing. She started with, "You just hate me, I'll kill myself if you don't talk to me. You're so mean, I hate you, you want me to die alone, you're so mean." Then she started crying and throwing dishes and stormed out. I texted my manager and closed the store. The next day the manager asked what happened and what I did to trigger her meltdown, and I explained I did exactly what she said. My manager said I was childish for doing that. And S was fired after corporate seen the footage. I told her she should have done it earlier because being closed for 8 hours is safer than 8 hours with a heroin addict. My last passed and my manager was upset we closed early with no server on third. Well, I hope the next person isn't so childish. Thanks for listening.